So, Jay and Lori Pyatt, welcome to the show. We're super glad to be honoring you as the empowered couple. Can you believe it?
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Thank
quite
you.
an honor.
I can tell why you said that's quite an honor, because I bet, Lori, you're thinking, I never thought we see this day, because you guys have kind of gone through the storm, and from the storm created something that's really big. And we're going to share that with the audience later. How do you feel about that, Jay? How do you feel about that, Lori?
I feel great. I mean, it's a heck of a lot better now than it was. So that feel by itself has been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about what your company does and what your company is. But first, Jay, I'd like to hear your side of your story. Can you kind of take us back from, at the intro, I mentioned that you guys, almost went through divorce. It certainly talked about it a couple of times. So how'd you go from there to where you're at now?
Yeah. So I had a 38-year relationship with pornography that led to a lot of hiddenness, a lot of secrets, and a lot of lies. Over a 4-year period, I lied to Lori about 1,000 times. And that does quite a number on your marriage when it all comes out into the open. And so I had to go through a multiple year process of rebuilding trust with her, of making it so that when I said something to her, she could actually believe it again. And that took a lot of different steps. There was humility on my part. I had to be very consistent. I had to be open. We had to build a whole lot of plans for different things. And it was not something where I could be halfway in anymore. Mm-hmm. I had to be all in on this process or it wasn't going to work. So that's kind of the quick and dirty, since we don't have a huge amount of time, but I have to be blessed.
Thank you for saying that. And I love the fact that you said you had to be all in through the process. Lori, what do you feel he means by that, being all in, and how did you see it?
For me, our healing didn't really start until about our 15th year. And even then it took a few years to get there. It took a few years for him to be all in. And what I saw was he had stopped his, he started having sexual integrity, but he was still checked out of the relationship. So for me, it was, I get that you've stopped. I get that you're trying to honor our marriage bed, but I don't get that you're still here. I feel like you're still checked out. And he had gone from kind of living this dual life, being married and having this hidden life, to being married and then being very into like digital products, video games or entertainment, that sort of thing. And I just felt like that was still the most important thing to him.
Yeah, being checked out. I mean, I'm a woman. I've been married 3 times. This is my 4th time. I think I'm in competition with Elizabeth Taylor, even though she's still gone. But no, the 4th one is the charm. Ladies, skip 3, go to number 4. Okay. But, I remember my previous husband. I remember that feeling, Lori, knowing or really feeling that he had checked all the way out, And I know from your side, that's a very empty feeling, but there's always something there in us women that still keeps that hope. Tell us about that for you.
Well, what I know about brain science, part of it's oxytocin. We do become bonded, very deeply bonded with the guys we're with, but also there's a hope in us. There's a desire for us to make the marriage work. Our brains are designed to be relational, to be all about community, to be all about relationship and
family, all about family, right?
Yeah. And some of the women I'm working with, it's not just them that it's affecting. If they were to leave, it would affect their children too. So that's my take on that.
Yeah. And they say only the strong survive. And, life, I call this life happenings, Jay and Lori. There's always something each and every one of us have to get through. For Jay, it was the pornography. For you, Lori, it was forgiving, I would imagine, and trusting again.
Mm-hmm.
But, let's keep it real here. Jay, was there a breakdown in the marriage that led to this?
No, there wasn't. I had this problem well before I ever met Lori. It was more about, the breakdown was really my inability to communicate. I had deep trust issues to begin with. So I had to overcome some of those. I had to learn to communicate differently, understand relationship differently. So there was a whole lot of things that I still needed to get correct in me.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't Lori's fault. It's just the dynamic occurred around her. And I hate to say it, but I lied 1,000 times, but the worst lie I said to her was that it was all her fault.
Ooh,
and that wasn't true. It was on me.
Yeah.
I'll say I needed to learn how to communicate differently too. When women, when they're in pain, they come with a certain intensity. Typically, that will cause the guy's wall to go up. So I had to learn to communicate differently. I had to learn to communicate my vision to him for marriage. When I did that, he really turned around. He's like, oh, I can get on board with that. So I had to learn some things too and change some things up on my end too.
Listen, audience, if you're wondering, well, why is Raven smiling? I'm smiling because in front of us is truly an empowered couple. Isn't this an amazing story? It's an amazing story of strength and courage too, Jay, because it took a lot of courage for you to own up to your part. And Lori, I know it had to make you feel better when he finally said, I lied. It wasn't your fault. It was my fault. This is something I've been dealing. This is issues. But I also love what you're saying, Lori, that you had to communicate too. So let's talk about communication, because obviously you guys did something wonderful there in communication. You're still together and you got this thriving business that we're getting ready to talk about. How important for all of our Valentine viewers and listeners is it for couples to really be on point with their communication? And what exactly does that mean, being on point with your communication, Jay?
Well, so from a guy's standpoint, women, not only do they want honesty, they want this thing called openness too. And openness means I'm telling her things about me without her having to ask. She doesn't have to pull teeth. I'm sharing all of who I am. And that's not just all of the big things. That's some of the little things too, because in this relationship, what really helped me was being fully known. And that meant all of my quirks, all of my weird thinking, that Lori knows about those things, and she still accepts me. And that makes this awesome.
Love it. What's your take on that, Lori?
For me, the communication, what does it mean to be on point, means how can we keep things calm enough to where we actually hear from each other first before the walls go up, or so the walls don't ever come up. And how do we say it in a different way? Because we all tend to get into these ruts of how we speak about things. And after a few sessions of talking with somebody, I can kind of tell, okay, I can imagine you would say this and then he would respond this way. So sometimes it's about how do we say the same exact thing, only in a different way, in order to help them go, okay, we're going somewhere new. I hear now what you're trying to say. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is just trying to keep things calm enough to keep from going into that fight flight response.
Fight and flight, yeah. And here's the thing, I noticed you said, I hear what you're saying. Do you guys think sometimes we're so invested in us being right when we're trying to communicate each other that sometimes we don't hear what each other is saying?
I think so. It's not so much I want to be right. It's just our brains get so stuck in thinking and kind of being committed to our own interpretation of what the other person must be saying. be saying, I feel really hurt by this, or I might have been saying, I feel really hurt by this, but he was hearing, Jay, you're wrong. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, this isn't about you being wrong. This is just about me. Like, I need to know that you know that this hurt me and the depth to which it hurt me, so you'll be more apt to not do it again.
Right.
But again, that intensity that I had, he just saw that and misinterpreted that as me saying, you're wrong.
Yeah. Wow. This has been amazing. And we appreciate the honesty and the boldness that you guys are bringing on today, because I know this is going to help a lot of couples. I mean, their situation might be different than yours, Jay and Lori, but it's having the strength to stay in the fight. And like you said earlier, Jay, be committed to going all the way with the process, right? Instead of checking out halfway and not being there. I think, Lori, for us women, and I'd love to get your take on this, I'll say for myself and many women that I talk to, a lot of times we see something, but we're not quite sure how to communicate it. And so we shut down and we kind of sort of check out, and that causes more friction. So Lori, I'd like to get your intake on that. And Jay, your point of view as a man when us women shut down like that.
Well, my take on it is that it's not necessarily all within her. You might hear, especially with the pornography issue, like not everybody has an issue with pornography. Not every woman has an issue with her husband using it.
Or they know about. But yeah, I get your point.
Right.
Yeah.
Those aren't the couples we're talking about. But if she feels like there might be an issue, she might go to say something, but then either society or maybe even the people she turns to for help will shut her down. And the funny thing about trauma is, because this can cause a traumatic response. This can cause,
of course,
like real signs of clinical PTSD. The thing that causes that is the shutting her down, is the not listening to her. So that's what I tell women, just try to find your voice and approach it. I try to give them different ways to approach it if they think it might be happening, in order to keep the conversation open so she's not feeling shut down. And then, it can cause some real alarm to start forming within her.
Jay?
Well, from my standpoint, when Lori would shut down, number one, I felt like I was abandoned in the relationship, which was a trigger for me because she was distant. And so then I would try to pursue and find out what was going wrong. The problem was I knew I was the source of the problem. So in some ways it is stepping into owning what I've done, how I've impacted the relationship, whether it was pornography as a betrayal or some other form of betrayal. I've impacted this relationship through my dishonesty, and that's the real problem. The pornography is a symptom. It's the dishonesty. It's all of those dynamics that really did all the damage. And so when she would withdraw, I would have to humble myself, look at what I've done and how I can show up differently, maybe to draw her out. And sometimes for some guys, they're kind of hoping, I just wish she would stop talking about it. And so they may not be at a place where they are going to pursue healing just yet.
Awesome. We're talking to Jay and Lori Pyatt, and this is about honoring them for being our empowered couple. As you have heard and seen, they have really gone through a lot, but they hung in there. They were committed to their relationship. And when we come back from our commercial break, we're going to let them share how they were able to go from that point into getting into business. Was it happening before, or is this how it started their business, and how they now empower each other? Back right after this commercial break.
Hi, my name is Jay Pyatt, and if you're struggling with pornography in your relationship or some other form of betrayal which is impacting your marriage, you can find some help. You can find some freedom. There's a a new video series we've put out called The Basics of Rebuilding Trust, which would be helpful for that, as well as just listening to the rest of our story here as we are on Raven International today. Thank you so much again, Raven, for having us on.
So welcome back to the second part of our show. We're here with our empowered couple. Yes, I'm so excited to finally have them here. I'm talking about none other than Jay and Lori Pyatt. Now, Jay and Lori, you guys stayed in there when many people would have walked away. Before we talk about the business and how you guys empower each other now, both in business and life, what made you guys decide to hang in there, and why didn't you just break up?
I had been divorced before, and I knew divorce is awful. That relationship was really unhealthy, and divorce was probably the best outcome. But being divorced sucks.
Yeah, it does. For someone that's done it a few times, yes.
Yeah, and going through it is terrible. And honestly, from my standpoint, what I realized was that to divorce would be saying, Lori, I'm really sorry I broke your heart, but the way I'm going to solve that is I'm going to cut off your leg and just disappear out of your life. And that's going to heal you. That's going to be the thing that makes all this better. And I realized that was kind of a hollow way to do this.
And for me, I went from, I'm a person of my word. I gave my vow. I'm going to stick to it, and I'm going to see this marriage through to, God, I guess at first it was, I promised you. And then it was like, okay, God, I promised you that I would do that. And then it was like, okay, God, you stood there with us at the altar. You promised us that you were going to see us through, because I don't have it in me at all to want to stick around anymore. And it wasn't just it wasn't just like being run over. It was like being run over and smeared across the street is what it felt like sometimes. The way it would, the way our conversations would go. And I remember the day I was like, God, if you are doing this so we can help other people, please find somebody else, because this is just too painful. Wow. And it typically was when I got that, it was typically when I became that desperate, or that when I got to the end of myself to that degree, that's when something would show up out of the blue that actually turned that issue around, like major solutions for that issue. And so I'd write them down and we'd practice them, and then we'd bounce back. So you have enough of those and you get to stay together.
Wow. Again, this is just a fabulous story, and definitely very inspiring, both inspiring and empowering. Can you maybe give us 3 of your major tips? And I'd like to hear 3 of your major tips on, for you, Lori, as well as from you, Jay, on what are some immediate things you did on your part to move things forward. Let's start with you, Jay.
Ownership. I had to own what I had done, and I had to keep owning it. I had a tendency to say, you're right, I absolutely did that. And then a week later, I would come back and say, well, it wasn't quite as bad as what you said it was last time. And so it was kind of this own and deny dynamic. So ownership was huge. I had to humble myself. I could not make this about defending who I was. I had to make this about repairing what I had done. And then really, I think the last thing was just getting some support for me. You know, that I had to have a group of people I could lean on, because I did have to confess some awful things. And, you know, if I stayed there, I could really begin to believe, not just that I had done some things wrong, but I am flawed to the depth of my being. And you know, so I needed to find some support for me.
Okay. What about you, Lori?
For me, support for myself as well. Healthy, helpful support. There is some non-helpful support out there. But yeah, I certainly surrounded myself with friends who would lift me up when I couldn't stand by myself. We even started going to Celebrate Recovery, which is a 12-step program within the church. Not necessarily because because he had kind of like went cold turkey with acting out. He had, I think, had 2 or 3 years of sobriety, but I needed somewhere where I could go and just vent.
Where people understood what you were going through, and you, like you said, you have that support of not just friends and family, but people that actually have gone through the same thing.
Right. Yeah, and we just vented, and it was a non-judgmental place. And I mean, come to find out, that actually starts healing the brain. Another thing that I kind of touched on before is I just had to find my voice. The more I met with people, with women who went, oh, you're really giving me something to think about. Not necessarily for the acting out piece, but the communication and relationship and that sort of thing. I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. So finding my voice within a supportive group was very helpful. And then boundaries. Boundaries is the third thing. I didn't know how to have boundaries. I didn't even know that I had a right to them. But when things got hairy, they're the things that saved us.
Yeah. Well, one thing you both have talked about, you talked about ownership and you talked about support. And I know it takes those two things for sure. Yes, Jay, we have to own up to whatever our challenges, whatever our issues, and we have to own our part and not try to find reasons. I like when you said, but you would come back the next day and say, but that really isn't how it is. And that's so human of us, isn't it? We own it for a moment and then we take it back. So I guess it's owning it and keep owning it and not, taking it back and doing the blame game. And Lori, the support is so huge, which leads me to now you guys are supporting other couples that have gone through that and have created a business from us. Why don't you guys just kind of take it from here and kind of share with us how that part developed and what exactly you do now to help others as an empowered couple?
Well, how it developed is I'm an avid researcher, and I mean, I have been researching communication techniques for over like 30 years now. So I've just been kind of gathering them along the way, but for whatever reason, they weren't necessarily working here. And that's like when those big, huge answers would come. And when we put put that solution into place, then the tools would actually work. So we just gathered them, and I've always known from about 20 years old and on, I wanted to help other couples. I just didn't know the hell we'd have to go through in order to have a program that actually works with couples. So while I'm glad now that we're able to help people, it was difficult. It was trial by fire. But we actually have something that's fairly effective.
And not just effective, I'm sure, it is something you both have built that you're extremely proud of. It's almost like your baby, right?
Yeah, in many ways, that is when we were building the business. So we started in business in 2016. We had the opportunity to start doing this.
For pay. We had been doing it volunteer, on a volunteer basis for a while before then. But
yeah, and some of the things that would come up in conversation between Lori and I as we were building the business is she would say, Jay, you need to understand, this is my baby. This is something super important to me, and I want it to look good. I want it to have all of the shine on it that it possibly can, because it is her baby. So that was an excellent observation on your part, Raven, that is true. And since then, we get to sit on the front row of watching other people's marriages heal and change and survive. That is, you couldn't pay me enough at a regular job to ever think about coming back and doing manufacturing widgets or whatever it is, because this actually matters. Long term, this actually matters.
Yeah, I can feel your passion behind this. And they always say, we usually build great businesses or write fabulous books, or create amazing products from the pain that we've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, you hear people say, how can you understand until you walked in my shoes? And you've walked in many people's shoes, both of you have, and are helping people. I'm just curious, and I'm sure other inquiring minds wants to know, when you help people, are you assisting people that have gone through the pornography struggle, or are you assisting couples in general? Tell us about that, Lori.
Well, we started by helping people who have been through this particular issue. The funny thing is, we typically always see anger issues, typically on the part of the addict, and then also communication issues. So, that's how we started. We're starting to branch out into helping couples in general, because it really is a lot of heavy lifting. And while we love it, we would also like to have fun, and it's several months working with a couple before we can really start having a lot of fun. So we're starting to branch out and taking the tools that we've learned, the hundreds of best practices that we've learned, and we haven't started this yet, but hopefully sometime this year we'll start having like retreats for people that aren't in crisis but just want to get to have a better relationship.
Yeah, they want to get to you guys before they do get in crisis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to the doctor and getting checked out before a major issue happens. So, and I think that's important. We can't just let that go by as something that's not really important for you to do. I think a lot of times, many of us, me included, we wait until something, some kind of crisis does happen before we ask for help. For us believers, it's kind of like we wait until something really bad happens the day before we pray, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of times we have to just go on out there and get the help, because many times, when you both agree, there's red flags, we're just kind of ignoring the red flags. Were there red flags for you, Lauren?
Yeah, there were red flags. I mean, I knew about the issue before we even got married, and I really wrestled.
Mm-hmm. But that's interesting you say that. So let's stop there, because for women, I don't know, Jay, I'd like to get your feel on this for men, but I know for us women, many times we do have those red flags, or we know about the situation, but we're thinking, I can change this person, it's going to be okay, and I think sometimes that's our downfall. How do you feel about that, Lori, with us women? We just kind of ignore.
Yeah, I didn't ignore it. I really, really, really prayed. I wrestled with God about it. I took it to my spiritual mentors. And also, I mean, I wish we had time to talk about a couple of pretty miraculous signs that happened. But then on, the message I was getting from the spiritual mentors was like, I think God's in this. I think he wants you to be together. And now I know why.
Okay. I'm a believer of that. And I'm just wondering how you, meaning the audience, have you ever been there to where, you had all the signs, but something in your gut, or that voice inside you, that quiet voice inside you was like, hang in there. This is going to be okay. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. I guess we just got to know when to stop and when to keep going. And you're like me, Lori, I'm a gut person, or I call it the spirit talking to me inside, quietly guiding me, that lets me know, keep going, keep going, keep going. Sometimes I was fooled. I guess it wasn't the voice I thought, but you're always glad when you get to that other side. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Jay.
As far as red flags go, I think, guys are like fixers. So I can fix that, or I can adapt when that gets here. But me personally, I also have a little bit of a Pollyanna, which means everything's going to be awesome.
Okay.
Kind of outcome thinking. And so the red flags to me were, it's like, oh, okay, we'll navigate that when that time comes. And it was a lot harder and a lot more difficult than it needed to be because of that kind of approach of mine.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you're doing to help others. If you had to pick the number one thing that your company, and by the way, feel free to say your company's name and answering the question, does, that's the biggest end result for your clients, what would it be?
Healed life.
Yeah.
Sometimes the relationship doesn't make it,
Mm-hmm.
but 98% of the time the wife is in a better place, a much, much better place. We just hope the guy joins her in it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's walk a client through your process real quick. Tell us about that. And I don't know, I think you guys have some kind of school or something. I'd be curious to know, do they get certificates? You know, what's the end result? So take us from the beginning to the end of a client, because I know that this message that you guys are bringing, this empowered couple message, and especially the subject of pornography or lack of communication, you know, is hitting home to a lot of our listeners and a lot of our viewers. So tell us more about what you do and walk us through the process of a client before we close out our interview today.
Sure thing. So I will say that the easiest way to get a hold of Lori and I, my website is called porniskillingme.com, which is very subtle, I know, but porniskillingme.com, and Lori's is His Porn, Your Pain Healed, or pornpainhealed.com. Now, we set those websites up because this was the kind of cornerstone of where we were.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also put out a video series on the basics of rebuilding trust, because when trust is broken, there's what I believe some basic steps you need to follow. And that's typically where we refer clients first. Watch this video and see if you can do this on your own, because some people can. If they can't, really the next step for our clients is to join one of our groups. So I run a couple of groups for men to begin helping them through the process. And Lori runs a group for women that's more of a short-term, 4-month process.
Yeah, what took me 15 years, I can now get them through that process in about 4 months. And that takes them through, to not get too technical, it takes them through the first 2 phases of the trauma model. And the third phase then is reconciliation in the relationship. So it gets her ready to, it kind of puts everything in place for her to be ready to do whatever it needs, whatever needs to be done in order to start healing the relationship, even if that means setting some hard boundaries or getting some space. So that's the next step. And then from there, if they need further help, then we take them on as first one-on-one clients, where he'll work with the guy and I'll work with the woman. And then later we'll get to working all 4 of us on a video call.
Right.
Awesome. So they're going through a group coaching, a live experience. Is this a course where they get a certificate at the end? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So basically I walk the guys through a curriculum that I have. There's not a certificate. There's either your marriage is doing better, or you're walking clean from pornography, or whatever that they can walk away with. But we do this online, so we can meet with anybody. We've had clients in Australia, the UK, all over the US. So really the challenge is, as long as they can speak English and they can meet at the time that works for our time zone, we can meet with them. Mm-hmm. I work them through a curriculum in group. Lori works them through a curriculum. And then in our 2-on-2, the couple-to-couples calls, we have a really more flexible curriculum, because every relationship is different. Yeah. And so there's not a cookie cutter approach that we take to everybody, but it leads to better marriage, more effective communication. There's a few things we look for before they, quote unquote, graduate, but there's typically not a certificate. It's usually just they're happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still together.
Yeah.
That's your certificate.
It's not just that, it's they become each other's mentors. And when we see that,
Oh, okay.
you don't need us anymore. You guys are each other's coaches. You don't need us.
Yeah.
You guys are coming up with your own tools. I mean, once we start seeing that, we look for like 4 things, and coming up with our own tools is one.
Mm-hmm.
And then really starting to become each other's, like being taught by each other and being open to that. It's like, once we see those things, it's like, you guys don't need us anymore. You guys are ready to graduate.
Yeah.
Fabulous. As we close out today, I just want our listeners and viewers to really, really think about where you are in your relationship right now. And be like Jay, own up to it. Don't, bury your head in the sand and say things are okay. And things are not okay. And I want you to take a look at this very courageous, fearless, unstoppable couple that we are honoring as our empowered couple, during this Valentine's Day season. But here's what you got to know. Valentine's Day is not about one day, just like birthdays and all these other holidays. It's not about that one day. It's to take a moment and honor it, but you want to keep it going all the time. So one of my final questions to both you and Lori J is, how do you keep each other empowered? How do you keep it to where your relationship is not just growing, it is glowing?
The number one, we make dating a priority. We have been every Saturday for the last 9 years, just about, we have been going out on dates. There's a place and time for that depending on how broken down a relationship is, but it's something we've been doing. And because of that, we are glowing. We are having those conversations, but we also go through, I have to continue to do that humility ownership pattern because I still do have an impact, and I need to be aware of how I'm impacting Lori with things.
Yeah. And I would say, we do use the communication techniques that we help clients with. Building a business is not easy. And we've gone from our conflict being about the broken trust to, we had a little bit of conflict getting this business up and running. It wasn't quite as often, and it certainly didn't lead to the same breakdowns as before, the same level of breakdown. But now it's like we go from like a 7-lane highway to a little rickety bridge to a 7-lane highway. And we're only on the bridge for about a few minutes, where it feels like really tight and we're like, oh, is this gonna blow up? But I'd rather be on it 3 minutes than the 3 weeks that it used to take.
Yeah, and we're all human. Here's the thing, so we cannot and will not have a perfect life. It's not going to be perfect all the way across the highway.
Right.
We have to be able to just get through the battles. And so, final question. How do you keep the breakdown from happening? How do you keep pushing past the pain to the power? What insights, lessons, and insider secrets can you close off the interview today to share with our listeners on that?
I would start with just that little feeling of resentment. When you're feeling just a little like, oh, I can't believe he did that or she did that, where you're like rolling your eyes kind of when they say something and you're just like, oh, here we go. Those are opportunities to go, hey, something's bothering me and I need to talk to you about it. I need to get it out on the table, because if I don't, it's kind of like pushing a boulder uphill. The further you push it uphill, the more damage it's going to do as it starts coming back down.
Yeah.
And that those little resentments are me pushing that boulder further and further up the hill. And the quicker I can talk about it, the less it's going to hurt when it comes off.
And then I would say, for the listener, when that happens, understand They're not saying you're wrong. They're not saying you're bad. They're having a feeling and they need to get it off their chest. You guys can work it out. You guys can work through it. And the more you realize, okay, they're just explaining their experience, they like me. They're telling me this because they like me. They want to have time with me. They're not saying I'm bad and they want to be away from me. They're bringing this up because they want to have a relationship with me. If you can keep that at the forefront of your mind and just keep things calm, then you can get back to having fun more quickly.
Yeah. I know a lot of times in many relationships, mine's included, we jump to the defense and something just comes out. Have you guys ever been there and you're like, did I just really say that? You know, and the other person is really walking away thinking you're feeling that, and that's not the case. You know, I feel, and as we close out, I'd like to get you guys feeling on that. It's important to not let that simmer, to address that up front. So my question to you two is, you know, have you ever been in that situation, and what's the best way to address it? At home, or should you wait till date night, or should you write a letter? I mean, how do you address something when you know you said something that probably crushed that person and you didn't even realize you said it until you did? And when you said it, is it true?
Right. I would say definitely not on date night. We tell our clients and the people we work with, date night, you put any negative conversation aside. You just go out and have fun, because that starts to addict you together. It starts to addict you to this person again, especially if you can add a lot of the sights and smells and tastes that you love, you know, favorite restaurant, that sort of thing. That will really start to addict you to that person. So not on date night, but I would say, you know, kind of the way Jay does it is, look, you know, that situation that happened when this happened, can we revisit that? I can imagine that really felt like blank whenever I said that to you. I'd like to apologize to you, and, you know, how can I make it right?
I like that. That's good. That's smooth. That's smooth, and it's taking it in a different direction, because you can bring up things and you're back in a fight and you're like, well, I just didn't want to even, I just wanted to address it. So what you're saying, you got to take the time to, timing is everything, is what I'm getting from that. And you really have to think about what it is you want to accomplish. What's your end result? And remind yourself, I'm not going to my mate to start something up again. You know, I want to empower them and empower myself for us to move forward.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, I've learned a lot today. What about all of you? Hasn't this been fabulous? And again, our guest is Jay and Lori Pyatt. And what's the name of your business, Jay?
My website is called porniskillingme.com.
And Lori?
Mine is His Porn, Your Pain Healed, or pornpainhealed.com.
And we want you to follow the links that you see in our posts, that you see in the magazine that they'll be featured in, and also that you see on our network, and contact them. They have many different links. So we're going to put as many as we can to help you. And if this does not affect you, you're not going through porn, you never went through that or dealing with a mate that was involved in that, you might know someone that you can share this interview with, and share the links that we put there. But don't forget, no matter what challenge we all go through, we can get through it. And thank goodness we now have a new support team called Jay and Lori Pyatt. Thank you again for being here, both of you. You were amazing, and because you guys are absolutely amazing and absolutely empowering and inspiring us all. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Lori. And we'll see you next time. This is Raven International TV Network, all positive programming 24/7. Please share us with a friend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hello, we're Jay and Lori Pyatt. I am from pornpainhealed.com.
I'm Jay Pyatt from porniskillingme.com. We just want to give you a quick tip. If you're having some sort of relationship breakdown that's related to betrayal, for the person who's done the betrayal, one really key important thing to get this done faster is to take ownership of what you've done. Don't blame the other person. Don't blame this on someone in your past. Take ownership of what you've done to the extent that you've done it. So don't take it too far and say, yes, I've done that a million times, but take ownership of it and continue to own it, because that other person needs to know that you really believe you did something wrong and you're willing to own up to it. So try that in your next conversation and see how that goes.